Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm very excited about our today's webinar. As you know, we do a monthly webinar about different topic areas of interest, always in kind of the realm of design and technology and design and usability, or design and human-centered kind of solutions. Today, we're talking about what's next in mobility and how to design it, on-road, off-road, and recreational. We have a couple of really exciting folks on the call. So only if you go to the next one. Actually, yeah, we have Michael Leighton, who's joining us from Polaris Industries or Incorporated, Hans Eckholm from Trek Bicycle, and Andrew Reynolds from Flux Marine. I also want to point out that we are having our next webinar in a month. It's going to be December 11th at our Boston office in person. And we have a couple exciting guests coming, and we're going to have also a panel discussion there. So let's get started. Also, yeah, if you want to stay in sync with what's happening in the Loft office or how we're thinking about design in general, subscribe to our newsletter. It is free. It's once a month, and we won't spam your inbox. And if you don't like it, you can always unsubscribe. It's the best way to also get caught up on more content, or the stuff that's on the website, or new case studies, but also some of the new latest designs that we're putting out. Yeah, let's get started. I want to make introductions. So Michael Leighton, he's the Director of Industrial Design and CMF at Polaris Inc. He has a distinct background in the mobility sector. Previously worked at Duke Cannon Supply and Polaris, and before that at 3M, and actually before that at Trek, and before that with me in music. So I've known Michael for a very long time, and I'm super excited to be have him on the call. He's also earned a BFA in Industrial Design and Business Management from the University of Stout in Wisconsin. So very excited. Stout alumni are always very practical and strategic thinkers. So we have two on the call today. So the next one is actually Hans Eckholm. He's the design director for Trek Bicycles. I would say probably arguably the largest bike company in the world, and really has kind of shaped the industry from the ground up. Hans brings a very unique perspective of innovation, functionality, and aesthetic to Trek. He's led the team, basically road bikes, accessories, digital experiences, both for professional athletes and everyday riders. He's also on the board of trustee for the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, and has worked at Sony Ericsson before that actually at Ethicon, and has earned a bachelor also from Stout. And finally, Andrew Reynolds, he's a seasoned industrial designer and leader of the product development efforts on the design side at Flux Marine. Flux Marine is, I would say, arguably the leader in outboard motor electrification, and has really brought kind of a very unique perspective to the outdoor recreational space. Before that, Andrews worked at Noble, Upper Baby, Motive Design, and is has earned a product design degree from Wentworth in Boston. And yeah, let's get started. My first question for everybody. We always talk about electrification. It's been really on the radar for a long time, but I would say beside that, really the greater sense of, I would say, maybe like computification of the mobility space has been going on for a while, right? So it used to be that there were legacy systems that didn't talk to each other. More and more, these systems are getting integrated and giving you a much more holistic experience. I mean, Michael, I think when I visited you, you showed me kind of the dash experiences of some of the off-road vehicles, or Andrew, when was at your shop and we did the demo, you guys kind of like had a screen that was really interacting with the outboard motor and give you much more like range, performance metrics, other things. And I know, Hans, you've been working very hard on kind of integrating kind of these performance features on interfaces. Maybe I'll start with you, Andrew. What's has changed in kind of mobility over the last 20 years or 10 years in aspect of like bringing systems together, and how does a user benefit, and how does it give you more opportunity as a designer to kind of imagine how people are reacting and interacting with the systems?
Yeah, I think boats in the marine industry in general have always been sort of fragmented. You have a lot of different parts and pieces that come together um, to build your whole boat. So a manufacturer builds a hull, they get an engine from somewhere else. And this is, I guess, comparison to the automotive industry, it's much more kind of pieced together from different manufacturers. And I think electrification, similar to an automotive, has kind of given um, you have the opportunity basically to look at building a more cohesive system and improving other areas of the user experience beyond just the actual propulsion itself. So I think like in automotive, um, people love Teslas so much, other electric cars, because they've considered the user experience so much more holistically, beyond just putting an electric motor into a vehicle. And I think similar is happening in marine, where you go to electric, you have all these sensors, and it's really easy to aggregate all this data. And then you can feed that back to the user on the dashboard, like what you saw, or on our mobile app. So you basically can build this much more connected ecosystem. It's kind of more inherent, I think, to the type of propulsion that's provided.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, as designers, right, that's kind of the dream we all live, right? Because we want to, we want to give the user the ability to kind of get all performance metrics and, and important kind of dashboard outputs in one cohesive package. So it's much easier to kind of navigate, and less user error. I mean, it's also kind of more a joyful experience. Michael, maybe you can talk a little bit about Polaris, because I know that you guys have been on the forefront of working in that space as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think inherently we're in power sports, which is primarily in the off-road space and on-road, right? We also have some marine businesses also, but if I just talk about off-road, for example, um, inherently you're navigating the natural world around you, right? It's different than driving down the highway between two lanes and watching out for other cars and navigating where you're trying to go that way. This is, I think, part of the reason why people enjoy and spend their free time riding our vehicles and using them to make their work easier, that type of stuff, is it helps them navigate the world around them, which is always dynamic and changing. You're not just going between two lanes on the road, you're dodging rocks and boulders and logs and those types of things. So I think what EV has done for us is bringing obviously the information that's inherent to some of the systems to unlock greater potential to navigate that world or do more with this vehicle to be more successful in the pursuit of whether it's working on a ranch, navigating the landscape, going out for a trail ride, those types of things. We're able to augment and actually grow some of the value and unlock new potential of how people use our vehicles because of some of the inherent technology with some of these things.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of, your, vehicles that really almost defined a new category, a new class of vehicle, right? I mean, I feel like people are using Polaris equipment now for anything, right? The DoD uses it. I mean, rangers use it, but also, farmers use it, right? It really replaced a lot of other vehicles that people kind of tend to take off road. How did that happen, and how did you guys kind of capture that market and kind of like capitalize on that?
Well, I'll give you just a very quick history lesson. We started out by, creating some of the first snowmobiles back in 1954, right? And so we've been in business since then and evolving what it means to navigate off-road since then. We, from snowmobiles, got into ATVs, I would say historical four-wheelers, and then obviously grew into creating the Ranger market, and then we invented the performance recreation market with the Razor vehicle. And so I think if you would have asked us even 10 years ago, hey, from an architectural standpoint, from the core functionality of the vehicles, they kind of do the same thing as they do today. But how people use them and the world around them in terms of the role that our vehicles play has changed dramatically. We're seeing in places like Utah where people are using these as their daily driver now. They prefer to use them as their daily driver because they're more fun, they're open air, they're more dynamic. And there's also a visual cachet that comes with it of just, I'm different, right? It's not your standard automotive. So much more expressive, much more dynamic from that point of view. And I think that's a good example of how, we're always looking forward to see what are the macro trends, those things of, and data points that can help us imagine what will the world be like, or that we could better yet create, in terms of how people can use our vehicles to achieve the things they want to achieve on a daily basis.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, going from four wheels to two wheels, Hans, maybe you can talk a little bit about kind of some of the exciting new categories that come, and also like the first question about, how does this all become a more cohesive experience?
Yeah, I think similar maybe to Andrew's roots in boating, the cycling industry was really built on human-powered vehicles, right? So that's kind of how we started. It was a simple machine that allowed people to get places and do things and race and have fun. And then with the advent of electrification, it started as an enhancement of that, just improve your performance, allow you to go further, faster, up bigger hills, that kind of thing. And I think now it's starting to evolve into its own creation, sort of like what Michael was talking about, of inventing new things. I think the bikes that have throttles on them, for instance, it's like it doesn't rely on the pedal and the human interaction as much as a typical bike would. That's sort of a new category in cycling, and it's sort of expanding and also kind of breaking the traditions of a lot of cyclists to imagine that a bicycle can have a throttle. So I think there's all kinds of advantages that the technology gives us by being able to enhance, like I said, the human performance to allow us to have more fun. There's some, it's a blast to ride an e-bike. If you've tried it, it's super fun. But I think the balance still is, how do we make it still a bike, and do we make it still a bike? Is that industry changing?
Is that kind of a conversation you guys have internally, that what's a bike, what's not a bike? Because obviously, at some point you're going to be an electric motorcycle, right?
Yeah, we've had some sort of inherent boundaries that we've just always relied on, that we're not a skateboard company, we're not a motorcycle company, but as you look at the spectrum of mobility, where do we want to play? Like, we have adjacent opportunities that we're evaluating and deciding if that's who we want to be, who we want to serve, and I think we're always developing concepts around that, and then it's a matter of, is this a business opportunity or not for us?
Right. On the other hand, I mean, if we go low tech, also, gravel bikes, the exact opposite, right? Very down the basic. You take the classic, 10 speed, on the road bike, put some wider tires on it, and it becomes a completely different fun category without any bliss blast and electric modification and stuff like that. I feel like the bike category has an enormous breadth of opportunity to design, right?
For sure.
As a designer, maybe I should start with Hans on that. Is actually, it used to be, I remember my first job, I worked for an automotive design house, and we do spend a lot of time on clay and building sketches, and then bringing that into 3D, and it was like kind of the skin outside, and then at some point the engineering team would kind of like build from the inside out, right? There was this like outside in, inside out, but it was never like, we were never as ingrained in, I would say, technology development. Nowadays, I feel like design is much more involved in user experience, like dashboards, hands-on, like human factors, integration with like technical aspects. Does a designer have to be much more technically versed these days, as back in the day where it was purely kind of a form exercise, or a form of maybe ergonomic exercise? I mean, how much does you and your team get into the weeds of, the pivot is not working, or ergonomics, things like that? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I feel like it got a lot more complex in mobility, with kind of these different technology platforms kind of emerging and evolving.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're talking about the evolution of design in general. If you think about when, I don't want to date you, but we started in school, there was less computer interaction in general. You're doing a lot of handwork with clay and sketching and things like that. And designers have always had kind of a broad playground of things that they could do. But I think it's just becoming more and more important for designers to have that breadth of knowledge, whether it's the technology that they're designing into the product, or the technology they're using to actually do the design work. And that's something I think all designers have to really embrace, is that it's a constant change, and it's accelerating with the new technologies that are out there with electrification. So
yeah, I'm sure we have a couple of folks on the call that are recently graduated or still in school. What's your advice to folks that kind of want to get a job at Trek or a job at like a mobility company? Like what's the most important trait you think?
One trait that's most important, I think, curiosity is probably one that comes to mind right away. I think you need to have that, the ability to imagine a different future, imagine how you can combine things together. I think that's something I would like to look for in all of our candidates, is that curiosity, and then somehow you have to convey that, with your portfolio, with the way you communicate, is talk about how excited you are about learning new things.
Excellent. Well, Michael, I know this is going to be a multi-tiered question and answer, but I was really stunned when you showed me, and I want to go back to what we talked with Hans about, kind of this technology and design kind of coming together. Remember when you said, "Hey, we're really developing the new product gonna be much more inside out, outside in, technology first, design first, all of it, right?" Can you talk about that philosophy and how you guys are approaching vehicle design at Polaris?
Yeah, but you're up a little bit, but hopefully my audio okay. It's a question of brand, right? Brand intent, brand positioning. What is your promise and reason for being? As we talk a lot about technologies and how far do you leverage technologies to bring information for us in our context of our vehicles. How much information you bring to the screen. Do you want people looking at the screen while they're driving down the trail, or are they there to get away from screens and look at the world around them and have appreciation for the beauty and the socialization that comes with the ride in our vehicles? And so we talk a lot about that, and where's the right place, and maybe the borderline or the edge of where we're getting maybe too ambitious with leveraging information and technology that detracts from the overall ride experience and intention of our customers. And that varies greatly depending on people's point of view and what they're trying to achieve. And so I think what we're trying to do is obviously understand the breadth of those opportunities and consciously make strong brand decisions that give us distinction and differentiation in the marketplace that resonates with our core customers and the future core customers that we're going to be, engaging with in, the decades to come, so to speak. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question. I think, you guys are really in a unique position, right? Because I think really well who you are as a brand, right? I feel like some other brands are kind of like want to be everything for everybody sometimes, right? And it shows, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's we also talk about that a lot, right? Because a lot of what we design, if you take our snowmobiles, for example, they're our longest running product portfolio in the company. They are the longest running probably in power sports also. And to really move the meter and have a really compelling, I would say, story to tell is very difficult. It's the hardest vehicle in our portfolio to design to, because it's a very nimble, dynamic machine. There's information on the screen that people need at a moment's notice while they're going through trails and across mountainsides. But there's also a huge ergonomic point of view to it, right? So it's a great challenge. We'll just say that, right?
Got it. And do you have the same team working on across disciplines, or do you have a dedicated snowmobile team that just works with snowmobiles?
Yeah, so from a design point of view, we have dedicated designers to specific areas of our business. We really want to build subject matter experts for the business so they can come to our design team and say, tell us the future of this, tell us where it's going. understand the value of design application to the portfolio as well as the positioning in the marketplace. So that's how we've started to organize our structure a bit. In other areas of the business, like engineering and those sorts of things, they also have dedicated, I would say, teams to portions of our portfolio as well.
Okay, excellent. Andrew, obviously Flux is a fairly young company compared to Polaris and Trek. And you guys know who you are and where you want to be? And how does that mesh with the design vision?
Yeah, I think
Is it a loaded question?
yeah, we're very young, so I think definitely still figuring that out. I think the thing that binds us is boating and the boating experience, and trying to improve that, with the propulsion and then with the user experience as a whole. So we think about the improvements that we get out of, way less noise, very quiet, no emissions on the water, less maintenance. And I think building that user experience and trying to understand what the boater actually wants and actually needs is the kind of thing that ties our brand together at the moment. Definitely still under development though. As we get more stuff out into the world with more and more customers and tell more people about who we are and what we do.
Mhm. I think it's interesting, right? Especially with boating, because boating is one of those categories where there's a high threshold of entry, right? It's very expensive. It's high maintenance. I don't think you know what you're getting into when you get a boat. And I mean, people say what the two happiest days in a boater is like the first day and the last day.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you have a great opportunity to kind of like change that paradigm, right? I mean, Hans and Michael, if you guys ever come out to the East Coast, I'm sure Andrew will give us a spin, but it's like a life-altering experience when you get like a Tesla type of acceleration on the water. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I think it does lower the barrier.
I accept the offer.
Anytime. It definitely lowers the kind of perceived barrier to entry for a lot of people. We have a decent number of customers who it's their first time owning a boat, and they only decided to make that leap because it was electric. Like they never even considered a gas boat. And these are people who might have electric cars or other exposure to electric vehicles. So it just makes a lot of sense for them. And the experience of getting in it and pressing a button to turn it on is a lot more approachable than having to deal with filling up at the gas dock and your yearly maintenance and things like that.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I think, obviously, I mean, we want to probably cover range excited a little bit, but like I feel like similar to Michael's, kind of journey of off-roading and experiencing the wild. I mean, there's a sense of serenity, right, that boating gives you, and obviously you don't want to have a loud engine behind you if you're going and in some pristine waters and really enjoying a day on in the ocean or on the lake. But at the same time, I mean, obviously there's a limit of how far you can go. As a designer, how do you guys kind of think about systems, kind of education, like to kind of make people feel comfortable coming home, or not getting stuck, or because obviously not like in a gas car where you can fill it up, or a gas boat has to go, can get filled up in emergency or has a wider range. Electric boats, you got to come back to the dock, right, to fill it up, basically, or recharge it.
Yeah. So our boats do around 30 miles of range at cruising speed, which if you're thinking your kind of context is in like the automotive space, that doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of boat trips are under 10 miles, especially when you think about lakes and just coastal cruising and things. Over thousands of trips that our customers have done, our average trip length is around 5 to 6 miles. So there's tons of applications where it makes sense with the current technology, and those are really what we're after. So like pontoon boats on lakes are a great use case. And a lot of people are using their boats more as transportation to get from one place to another than do an activity in that location versus, the driving of the boat at speed being kind of the main activity. So we just try to find the things that make sense for now, and then as technology continues to evolve, batteries get better. I'm sure that'll open up new use cases and opportunities.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. How do you, I mean, there's always kind of this push-pull between engineering and design, right? I'm sure you guys are doing user research, and sometimes you learn about something that you have to kind of put in the next generation of motors, or how do you navigate that? How do you bring that passion of the user's needs to like a technology-driven company? Like, is that an easy task? I mean, I know your founders are very visionary, but it's probably still like, a daily conversation.
Yeah. We try to get out on boats a lot and do a lot of boating ourselves. And then also talk to our customers. We have a great group of kind of core initial customers who are also fairly involved in kind of user feedback and evolving the product as well. So we just try to keep the communication up and then just come back to like the core principles of simplification, like kind of like what Michael was saying, like a lot of people you can get really into what are we going to put on the screen here or what is the app going to have, but in reality people just want to be on the water with their family and friends. So really trying to just simplify and distill the experience back to what people want.
Yeah, Michael, I mean, I know Polaris has a lot of engineers that work on all of different aspects of the vehicles. And I know that, traditionally I would say what is it, 1 to 10? There's 10 engineers for one designer. Is that in automotive, that's usually what it is. Is it similar? Probably.
I would say we're a little bit different. We're probably more engineering heavy than, and probably not quite what that ratio is in automotive. We'd like to get closer to that at some point.
Right.
But we started out as an engineering organization, right? And that's been the core of kind of our core competency as a brand and as we've migrated into other areas of new business opportunities, right? So engineering has always been core to what we do, from not only a functionality, performance, but also getting into the manufacturing, because we own our own manufacturing also. So there's a lot of those details that we have to manage to be successful. So engineering is always core, but from a design point of view, it's that healthy tension between all those attributes and requirements from the engineering side, balancing them with, well, what are the user needs, right? Why are they entertaining or interacting with our brand? What are they looking for that resonates with their desires? And how do we bring some of that to life in a very consistent but thoughtful manner that helps them, feel good about what they're doing, be more successful in the task at hand, those types of things, right? So it's that, I would say, really good empathy and understanding for who is the customer we're discussing. And I think what's interesting about our vehicles, and in a lot of cases, they have a lot of jobs to do. It's not like, being at Trek, I'll use that as an example. A lot of times your bike is your bike, right? It's fit for you and you're the person who's riding it. Our vehicles are very dynamic where you might go on a trail ride with your family, but then 20 minutes later, you're pulling stumps with the same vehicle and using it as a work machine. So there's a lot of different personas and jobs to be done that our vehicles have to do day in and day out and be able to pivot at a moment's notice. So understanding all that and the user needs is part of what makes design really, I would say, powerful at Polaris, is translating those into not only design requirements and engineering requirements, but also value to the business and the opportunity for the brand.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I think that's called, I mean, in a sense, that's the job that designers have in an organization, right? Being that kind of hub of the spoke between marketing, design, marketing, engineering, and sales and kind of manufacturing, right? I know, Hans, you've been a spoke for a long time. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you guys are doing it at Trek, and how reflecting on kind of our conversation.
Yeah. So addressing the customer needs and research, is that the question you're hoping to?
Yeah, and also the heavy tension, like the good tension with engineering and kind of where to kind of bring the user centricity to an engineering problem, basically, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love working with engineers. I think if you're a good designer, that should be your attitude. Like that relationship is so important. It's really important for the bicycle industry. If you think about how a bicycle is designed, it's the support features are the product. So you're not able to cover it with body panels or things like that yet. Maybe we'll do that in the future. But so that relationship has always been very important at Trek, and it's important for me, I think, just as a designer, because they enable you to get the vision manufactured in people's hands. So that relationship, I think, is always strong. How we bring the user into that equation is not a separate research arm of our business, but it's actually the people that are designing the product. So designers, engineers, product managers, marketing people visiting and riding with our customers on a regular basis is how we're sort of able to learn together. And that's been a really powerful way for us to align and focus on the customer rather than ourselves.
So when you talk about kind of the transformation of the bike industry, right, in the last 10 years, I know that we talked about kind of like what's a bike, what's not a bike, you guys sometimes kind of do these, I would call them future visions, where you kind of try to push the envelope of what a bike is, and how does that, empower or kind of like inform like future generations of production vehicles or for production?
Yeah. We did something a few years ago that was really powerful. If you're familiar with Porsche's methodology that they've used in the past, called Uber Morgan, or it's basically you're here and you're trying to think about what you want to do tomorrow, but instead of just doing that, you actually design like super tomorrow, Uber Morgan, what's going to be far away, and then back cast. Right. So we've done that exercise, sort of formally, but we've also done that informally, where you kind of project way out to something that's maybe absurd, but imagine that that's the future, and how would you design your path to get there, right? So that's one way that we've sort of utilized that, I guess, thought.
And do you have a dedicated team, like a future vision team? I know, for example, Bose, one of our clients, has like a future vision team that works kind of 10, 15 years out.
We don't currently have that. We have experimented with several iterations of that type of thing. And one of the issues we've come against, which I'd love to learn from others on how they do it, but we've always had an issue where the transfer of knowledge from what's going to happen in the future to the daily requirements of what's going to happen, in 3 days, that handoff is really awkward, and we haven't been able to master that. So the best way that we've been able to do it is to have the same teams that are doing, next day's work also think about the future. And so we have projects going in both categories for each team.
And I mean, if you split your markets, it's not that dissimilar from Michael's, right? You do off-road, you do on-road, you do like transportation mobility, more like city bikes kind of things. Do you feel that as a global company also that certain regions have certain influences that are very distinct, or do you think that the bike market is very global and everybody wants the same bikes?
No, I would say it's very different in different places. In Europe, there's a bike as a vehicle that you use to get to work and school, and we have a little bit of that in the US. It's growing, but there's also a huge recreational market in the US, from both the performance side of I want to go fast and do crazy things on a mountain bike, or I want to have a cool little throttle bike to get around with my friends. And I'm 14 years old and having an awesome time doing that. So yeah, it's pretty varied, I would say. I'd say there's some common things of just how it feels to be on a bicycle, I think, is global, but how you use the bicycle is pretty different.
Mm-hmm. So in other countries, do you think that bike is more a utility vehicle versus kind of like a recreational vehicle?
I wouldn't say that it's, I would just say the emphasis is different.
Okay.
The balance of how you know, how important is utility is probably more important in some countries than others. But I wouldn't say it's a generalization like the way you put it. But
And
yeah, there's a variety.
and do you have, I mean, I know you have different teams all over the world. Do you, can you talk a little bit about that kind of like the vision for Trek to kind of serve different customers in different markets?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, a product can be global. That's the most economical way for us to make products. But there are some niches that need special attention. So we have a group in Europe that's focused on the European market. We have Asian development as well, and so they're always on the lookout for what's happening in their region, and we might need to make an entirely new product or tune a product or have a different version of it, different spec to make it more relevant in those areas. One other thing that's related to this I wanted to bring up, and I was curious about this from Andrew's point of view too, is with the electrification and technology that's being added to our product line, we're seeing new customers, not just people that we would traditionally think are buying a bike. It's people that maybe never considered buying a bike suddenly are considering buying an e-bike. And I'm guessing that might be similar for Andrew if you were worried about the hassle of gasoline engines and now suddenly there's this e thing, it might be a different group that they aren't used to, which is awesome, but it's also a little daunting because now you have a whole new customer that you have to learn about and try to decipher what they want.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that with quite a few of our customers, that it just gives them the kind of opens their mind to boating. They weren't previously boat owners. And yeah, just the fact that it's electric really lowers that barrier to entry for them. And I think, yeah, the idea of like expanding boating overall is really compelling to us. Just getting more people into it that wouldn't have otherwise considered it.
I know, Andrew, right now you're kind of focusing on the outboard motor. Do you think that there has to be a boat following the outboard motor to kind of really make a more cohesive experience that is different?
Yeah, so this is a challenge that we face, is like we don't own the entire user experience of the final thing that the customer actually uses. So we build the outboards and the battery packs and some in the control system, and we integrate that into existing hulls we have a couple of really great hull partners that we work with. So we don't, we work with their system, they work with us, and the customer experience is that basically all as one vehicle that they're actually operating. We would like to not become a boat builder. That's a very different skill set than what we're currently doing, which is more on the electric propulsion technology. There are companies that are building the entire boat, but it really limits your kind of market opportunity because there's thousands of boat builders in North America and the world, and there's only a few large outboard manufacturers. So we would like to supply propulsion systems to all those boat builders, hull manufacturers. And the trade-off, I think, is that you do give up some of that control over the user experience. But I think we'll start to kind of bring more of that under our roof in terms of like the things the customer experiences, the things they touch at the helm, not just the outboard itself, but a longer term vision is we become the propulsion supplier to a lot more hull manufacturers.
Makes sense. Michael, I mean, you guys invented product categories that come with new users, right? That, as you said, that, do you have similar concerns with Hans that you kind of have to learn these new users' needs, and how do you guys manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our Kinetic Ranger is an example of our EV side by side, and we set out to make the most high performing Ranger ever. And what we learned was some different things, right? It was a new user that actually gravitated towards that vehicle because of the unique capabilities and use cases that were new that vehicle unlocked, right? And so for us, we spend a lot of time on the ground listening to our customers, listening to our dealer network, getting feedback in perpetuity to make sure that we are constantly informing kind of the design funnel of ideas and thinking to make sure that we're understanding, yeah, who are these customers? How are they evolving? How is our vehicle meeting or not meeting some of those needs? And then, obviously, how do you put that into a plan of action from a business perspective is part of the work of design also, translating those big visionary ideas or insights into, okay, well, how do we act on this thing, right? So for sure, when we bring new technologies in, even like our ride command infotainment display, where now you have group ride and some of these other more, I would say, connected type features and functionality, they always bring in new users who have different needs, and we're constantly learning, well, what are those, right? How are those evolving? Because they move a lot faster in some ways versus our traditional sort of side-by-side customers.
What's your product cycle? I mean, how long does it take from like first pen on paper to a new vehicle? It must be years, right?
Yeah, it depends on the level of complexity. We have a sort of a tiered level of complexity at Polaris, and it ranges anywhere from quick changes, right, to multi-year visionary work, that kind of stuff, for sure.
Impressive. I mean, multi-years, that seems fast in the automotive industry. I think it takes what, 5, 10 years to build a car usually. I mean, I think they're getting faster, but it's a much longer product cycle.
They are getting quite a bit faster with a lot of the new entrants also in automotive, from Tesla's an example, but everything that's going on in Asia, the way they're treating assembly systems, how parts go together, is really streamlining the development cycle. And so we're learning and watching a lot of different industries to say, where are the things that are applicable to power sports that we can pick up and leverage. So.
And that you have your own production lines for gas-powered vehicles, but also for the EVs?
For EVs, we do, but we also have really strong strategic partnerships for those areas that we need subject matter experts that are beyond what our current capabilities are. So we'll create those partnerships and leverage those to bring new products to market.
Excellent. Hans, how do you guys manage kind of the ever evolving complexity of supply chain and all these aspects? And where is the designer in the middle of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy lately, as you guys all know. I mean, with tariffs and stuff, it's really interesting for us. We've moved production all over the world to different places to sort of address some of those things. From a designer's perspective, that's another learning opportunity. How does a new supplier build a bike? How do we use their technology to maybe bring us to a new place? So it's exciting. It's sort of a nightmare though right now, to be honest.
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, most of our clients face similar challenges, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, I think, I always say you can lose 90% of your design intent in the last 10% before you go production. And it's really, when the rubber hits the road, you start kind of realizing, okay, this panel doesn't go together or whatever. We need to have extra fasteners or always a million things, or it comes back from testing and some things fall off, and then your beautiful, fasten-free panel all of a sudden has extra screws in the middle that you don't want to see. So I'm sure you guys are all facing this on a daily battle. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the circular aspect of vehicles, because I think it's a really important one. I think that mobility itself is, as you guys said, exciting, and as vehicles get older, obviously, there's a recycle aspect or a refabrication aspect. How do you, maybe start with Andrew, how do you guys kind of plan obsolescence and do you guys even think about kind of like, okay, people are going to bring it back, there's like a trade-in, or panel parts can be replaced? Like, is that something that part of your design considerations?
We definitely think about the lifespan of the motors and the batteries. I think one thing that's unique with marine is the number of cycles you'd have on the battery are very low compared to automotive. You just don't, the people who use their boats the most are probably running their motor for 100 hours a year, maybe 200 hours if they're in like a commercial setting. So we have really good longevity just based on the low usage characteristics in marine. Um, the big thing for us too is the environmental, I guess the environment for motors in is incredibly harsh. So saltwater corrosion. Um, so designing just to basically make it have a long life from the beginning is very important. Um, and then boats, I mean, they last a really long time and they can always be refit, rebuilt. We have, there's old boats that we'll work with customers to put new motors on, and that is pretty common, especially with outboards. When things get a little older, tired, they can just go back in the shop and get kind of restored. I think that probably happens a little more on boats maybe than in automotive. So you're really freshen things up after 20 or 30 years in service.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, Michael, how does it go with you guys? I mean, I know that you have probably pretty sustainable practices and things like that.
We do, but I think also, I mean, just from a usability point of view, I mean, a lot of our customers like to find the limits of our vehicles. So design for disassembly and serviceability is just core to our business, right? From a longevity, life cycle sort of extension, we have to design for serviceability, but also from just, I would say the complexity of our manufacturing requires that also. So it's kind of inherent to the work that we do. But there's things from a design perspective that we're leaning in on in terms of identifying new materials that have less impact or greater longevity or different attributes that can help, manage some of the pretty harsh environments that we have. Like again, snowmobiles, you're in 40 below, but then on the flip side, you have a 200-degree plus engine. And so the thermal environment that a lot of our vehicles live in is pretty dynamic, right? And so we're always looking for new materials that bring design to life, but hit a lot of those requirements and that sort of thing. So it's an ongoing topic on our end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I know the, I mean, these things live outside 24/7, right?
Correct.
Um, yeah, Hans, I mean, I know that you
Yeah.
get,
In this is an interesting topic because I have a 1950s Raleigh that my dad had, and probably 50% of the components on that I could buy in store still and repair it because there's been such a history of cycling. The standardization was a big deal, right? And now we have all these new suppliers, all these new technologies. The standardization is kind of going out the window. So now it's a struggle to make a bike that's going to last 75 years now. So like thinking about that is really interesting and sort of fun problem to try to solve. How do you standardize a rapidly changing a technology? So yeah, it's tough. I think the disassembly and replacing those parts is important. I also think there's another piece of it is there's so many things we can do with technology, but how many of them should we do? And that's part of sustainability as well. Like, what are the things that are going to survive over time that are, real user-centric needs and desires, and not just the technology-enabled things we can do. So, yeah.
but especially with like electrification, right? It seems like there is, there would be an opportunity for designers to, almost think of it like a system level, right? Where certain components get designed and then, they can be replaced over time, right? Like motors and more drivetrains. But obviously, as you're right, I mean, with all the different suppliers coming in, it's probably a constant struggle to even, set them up and get them started. Adding the complexity of modularity is gonna probably be, hard next step to follow, right?
Yeah, it takes years to get those standards sort of locked in and for multiple suppliers to agree that, okay, that's the best way to do it. We're going to continue to, do it that way for years. Yeah. lot of learning and experimenting happening right now.
Yep. We have about 10 minutes left. So I want to do a final round, but also if anybody has questions, put them in the chat and then I can read them out. We can, cover them for the last 5-10 minutes or so. Clotilde actually had a question. What makes you most excited about the emerging of AI in the mobility applications? And maybe we start with Andrew, since I have no idea what he's going to say.
I think, we don't have any AI per se in our products currently. I think there's interesting applications probably in predicting maintenance and failures based on a large data set. But yeah, nothing at the moment. Curious, what do you guys think?
Who wants to jump in?
I guess from a player standpoint, similar to Andrew, we're constantly looking at what are the AI tools available to us and which ones are applicable to what parts of our business, right? Obviously in my role, we're looking at the design development side of things, but also, there's opportunities to leverage it downstream from dealer interaction, servicing, that kind of stuff. So we're evaluating a bunch of things, but we don't necessarily have a key thing that we're hanging our hat on at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've experimented with it. Actually, we did a project with Loft, which was dealing with some of the sort of computer vision and other things that are around safety and that kind of thing. So I think there's definitely some exciting things on the horizon. I would say most of us we're consumed by the tools that designers can use based on AI, the BizCom and other things in the tool belt. I think that's maybe where AI is the most exciting for us right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Because Hans, Trek has its own stores, right? So in a sense, you could have a much more holistic, like omni-channel experience from purchasing the bike to servicing it to maintaining it to kind of touch points with the user, and then also getting performance metrics back. Those are unique opportunities for AI to kind of capture data, and as Andrew said, predictive maintenance, or even sending a reminder of replacement parts or things like that, right? I think what we learned from, we work with a company called Ceres. They do bike racks, right? And what we learned with that interaction was that more and more EV bike owners are elderly folks that really love the joy of biking, but just don't have the power to ride and cycle. And obviously, they're probably also not as technology savvy to understand how to maintain and evolve bike functions. So like a support framework there could be really interesting, right? And as you're collecting all the data anyway, maybe it's
we're very fortunate to have data from kind of all of the aspects that you covered. I think that and then digging into it and starting to, I think we have a lot of data and we're using it for certain things, but unleashing that data to people to use AI tools in that arena is like the next frontier for us. There's going to be a lot of cool things that come out of that.
Makes sense. Yeah. If any more questions I have, please drop them in the chat. I want to do a last round. I think, mobility is one of those frontiers where I feel like a lot of stuff has happened. Car companies are being disrupted. There's new markets evolving. We always talk about, and I think, Andrew, you brought it up, the Tesla owner has like a new experience. They don't want to go back to regular bikes. But maybe we start with Hans, what's the next 10, 20 years going to do for mobility? As you know, if you look at the Porsche kind of system of looking into the future, where do you feel we're going to head in terms of your industry?
Well, I think one of the biggest barriers that people have in cycling is safety concerns, right? And I think that is probably one of the biggest areas that's going to be impacted in the future with sharing, a person on a bicycle sharing a road with a giant truck. And right now, the opportunity for those to interact is unfortunate sometimes. And I think the technology of communication between vehicles and infrastructure is going to be a major change. Probably enable a lot more people to get on bicycles.
Mm-hmm. Michael.
An interesting question. And I think that's what makes kind of the jobs we have at Polaris so exciting, right? Is it's an unknown, right? I mean, again, 10 years ago, you couldn't have imagined how people would be using our vehicles the way they are today. And so we are spending quite a bit of time looking into the future to saying, what are those macro trends that are happening in the world? And what are the theoreticals that we can build points of view or narratives around to help us understand what if statements, right? And design at Polaris is uniquely suited to do that work. So we're leading a lot of that work. But have a crystal ball and say, where's it going? I think it really depends on what are the societal trends, how fast do some things move versus others, from just the way people live, urban versus rural, the shift in some of those things that we're seeing, and the role that our vehicles play is an evolving target, so to speak, right? And so again, our goal is to understand to the best of our ability and theorize what are those new personas, what are the new use cases, excuse me, that then we prepare our vehicles and our portfolio and our brand for. We're really excited about where it's going because we think there's a whole new sort of expectation of the experience and the role that our vehicles play in the daily life of all these new types of use cases in the future. So unknown, but that's the work ahead, and we're pretty excited about it.
Excellent. Yeah, Andrew, what's the next 10 years of Flux?
I think in marine, we're just still so early on the adoption curve that the next 10 years is really going to be about streamlining the technology, evolving it over that time, and really just getting it into, when you do go to buy a boat, it is just kind of the decision, do you want electric or gas? And there's plenty of offerings out there to get people what they want.
Mm-hmm. One question from the audience also that I want to circle around, and I think we're wrapping up with that. Design language, right? I think all of the brands on the call today have a very distinct design language. I mean, I admire, Andrew, what you've done at Flux, obviously. I mean, Michael and Hans, you guys have done really stellar work. But obviously, as your portfolio gets wider, right, how do you keep elements the same? How do you recognize the brand? What are the pillars of your visual brand language to keep it across all those different products? Maybe I'll start with Hans actually, because it's probably a daily reminder of his existence.
Yeah, and it's a struggle. I think it's always a struggle to sort of prescribe how something should look when everything's diverging. So what are the pieces that continue on, and they might be less. They might be more emotional kind of things that you talk about versus physical things. So I think that's some of the ways that we talk about brand language is, the emotion that it gives you. Is it doing the right thing there? And then being willing to evolve that. We had a very strict design language for a long time, and we've loosened that up recently, and now trying to figure out what parts of the loosened up version are we going to carry forward. So I think it's always evolving. It's a fun exercise. I'm also curious how important you think it is that we look the same. Yeah.
I think you touched upon it, right? I think the emotional value of a brand is much more important than the physical representation, right? It's how your brand feels, and also there's certain touch points that can be consistent that really represent kind of that emotional value, right? And it can be a game changer, right? I mean, when you're interacting with a certain brand, if it's well done, sometimes you just can kind of guess without even looking at the physicality of the offering, right?
Yeah. I will say on the digital side, like consistency is something we're striving for, so that, when you get into a car, and it doesn't matter what car you drive, like there's some cues where you kind of know what to do, and we want to make sure that happens with bicycles as well, so that anybody can get on a trek and enjoy the experience without a big learning curve.
Yep.
So
Michael,
that'll bring some brand language, just the consistency of that.
wrap it up for us.
Yeah, so I think, Hans, you kind of hit on it. We talk about it as like emotive jobs to be done. The feeling you get left with from the moment you see it the first time to the last time you use it, or the first time you physically interact with it. Those are the things we're really concerned about. Obviously, we have very visually emotional vehicles that have a point of view, but those jobs to be done, the values, the attributes are core to what Polaris is. How they manifest themselves in a visual brand language is the job of the designer. You need to evolve and progress that narrative so there's something new, engaging, exciting, desirable for the customer that continually repositions Polaris in whatever way, shape, or form, depending on what the market is, specific segment, whether it's performance recreation on our Razor side versus Ranger on the utility side. So we do have some key sort of pillars that we call emotive sort of jobs to be done. But again, the translation of those into the context of our customers of today, what's exciting, what's new, that's always evolving.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And we are at the hour, unfortunately. Yeah, keep in touch. And I'll see you at the next webinar. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for your